vieną, traukiu. Lūžo. Verk, seniai. Aš negaliu jai nieko daryti, blemba.
The northern wilderness has always attracted nature enthusiasts and anglers. The wide, boundless expanses, steeps, short summers, and very long days. In midsummer you can experience the white nights when it's light around the clock. It seems you could fish endlessly, but you run out of energy, and when you need to rest and sleep in daylight, it can become a real challenge. That's often what happens. The combination of all these feelings, fatigue, and the endless expanses of wild nature around you, not to mention the impenetrable clouds of mosquitoes, make you want to return here again and again. And for good reason. Mushrooms, berries, fish, completely wild nature, and minimal civilization stimulate your primal self much closer to nature than you are now. This way, you can restore your connection with both nature and yourself. Traveling north is for me personally true romance. At first it's all the same as always, road, forests and meadows, but then the sea. The sea and ships has always been synonymous with travel and adventure. Wide boundless distances, monotonous waves, fellow travelers sipping beer and people pushing each other in the duty-free shop. It's great if you manage to catch a Tallinn-Helsinki cruise on a weekend and witness pilgrim journey, or rather an odyssey to the promised land of cheaper alcohol. Finally, after filling your luggage and heading back to your homeland and having gathered some foamy courage from the pitcher of eternity, you sing a song on the karaoke stage. I've always been fascinated by such a courage. I am much more inhibited or simply unable to drink the necessary amount. The asphalt is uniformly gray, but the further you get from big cities, the fewer gas stations, inns, and roadside cafes there are. The roads narrow, the steeps widen. There are fewer and fewer cars. In fact, you sometimes see more reindeer on the roadside than other cars. If it's your first time here, it's a bit surprising. They feel like they own the road and aren't afraid of anything. It's not them bothering you, but you bothering them. You won't see much intelligence in their eyes, no aggression. It's clear they lack natural predators here.
Gerai. Detalės yra. Detalės yra. Virduliukas yra. Kavos yra. Jo. Pasižiūrim, kas gausi su šitu skeltuvu. Atsargiai. Ponai, atsargiai. Gerai. Viskas. Turim biškį. Kaip fakilas. Vandenuko. Tarpinė matyt jau paėjus. Vandenuko turi? Pilam vandenuką. Moškių yra.
Perhaps out of necessity or more likely out of pleasure, we enjoy coffee. Not coffee from a shiny, buzzing machine that does everything for you, but just black round coffee, which we brew right here on the roadside, having pulled out a gas cylinder, travel kettle. Less is more. The process brings everyone together around the fire, even if it's just a blue gas flame, but the shared activity has positive effect on the crew. Besides, we need to stretch our legs, which have gone numb from sitting in the car for so long. When fishing, I almost always carry a backpack, often quite large one. I pack all sorts of filming and photography equipment, which I love, but obsessed with the charm of the moment, I don't always take the camera. When I get home, when the emotions and experience I've been subside and they no longer seem self-evident, I realize I've missed another good story. And it's happened hundreds of times. And no matter how many times it happens, I feel like I'm stepping on the same rake. The realization of what you experience comes much later, and I can find a way or technique to catch it. And sometimes I have tea, coffee and some snacks in my backpack. A thermos is very convenient, but in the north, when the length of day is immeasurable, I prefer a kettle. It's a real pleasure to stop, make a small fire and brew coffee from river water while listening to its crackling and the gurgling of the water. However, I started talking about photo equipment and drifted off to the campfire in my daydreaming. This time I wanted to tell you a story that happened once on a trip to the north, and as you can probably guess, I didn't capture it. However, I have some poor quality phone evidence. and I'm very grateful to Rimond. At first glance, Rimond leaves an impression of an expat, and this impression perfectly reflects him. A man with vast life and professional experience always has a special place in our crew. Conversations, discussions, stories, and action planning with this man make the journey fly by. Rimond inspires me to travel even more. Although he's not one to brag, take photos or film everything in a row like I do, his stories about fishing trips to various lands are truly inspiring. And since we've driven thousands of kilometers together on fishing trips, I know many of those stories. Salmon fishing is probably one of the most mystical activity you can do with a rod in your hand. The whole process, the fish's journey, habits, and circumstance beyond your control temper you like steel. And who could tell how many empty fishing trips have been experienced over the years, but also how much has been learned. Not catching a salmon during a fishing trip is nothing surprising, so it's no wonder that on this trip, accompanied by favorable fishing conditions, Rimond was the first of the three of us to catch a salmon. Maybe it's a coincidence, or maybe it's experience and thousands of tied flies in preparation for his regular trip. You decide. I can only say that if you ever have a chance to go on a trip with this man, don't miss it.
Nu, dėdė, kaip jaučiatės?
Pirmo gyvenime lašyšą, koks jausmas, Raimė?
Koks jausmas?
Nereikia.
Koks jausmas, pirmo?
Koks jausmas? Pirmą metrą.
Pirmą didelę.
Duok, pameškite man, palaikykit. Nusimkite lasdą.
Reikia iš karto atkabinti musę. Turi žnyplės? Turiu. Bėgo Raimė žuvis.
Jau man dabar, žinai, ne taip ir svarbu. Pabėgo ar nepabėgo.
Ui, mamulė. Kokio grožio.
Sėdus gerai.
Tai jau matys, kad jin sėdus gerai. Jau čia Raimė tau už tą klaidą atleido jinai.
Matau.
Ant tokios nesąmonės.
Nesąmonės, jo.
Kas čia per šūdas?
Kažkokia spurgos imitacija.
Maladėts, Raimė, pizdauskas, maladėts.
Nesikeik.
Ką?
Keiktis nereikia, jeigu filmuoji.
Reikia.
Raimė čia emocijos.
Plaukus biški pasitaisyti reikia.
Jo, usiukai susivėlė.
Jo.
Atpūtom klipė.
Va taip, va.
Biškutį dreba rankos.
Tai čia svarbu nenušnapso.
Pirštai dreba. Viskas. Pala, paleisiu.
Paleisk Raimė tą žuvį, kur švedai pagavo.
Le, viskas.
Va, švedų pagautas žuvis keliauja atgal.
Raimė ko?
Lauk.
Plauk nenervavus, ane?
Ranką stojam.
Duok žaibą.
Maladėts, Raimė, atidarėjai ir padarėjai. Šaunuolis.
First I lost in 5 seconds, but it was 3 meters from the bank and
Now we can go get drunk.
yeah, let's go get drunk.
Ar žvėjosi dar šiandien?
A kokio dydžio buvo neaišku.
Kokie 7 cemų buvo.
Nu,
Pem,
Ar
šiam.
žvėjosi dar Raimė šiandien?
žvejosiu.
Rimtai?
Taip.
Maladėts.
O buvo vyrai didelė.
2 metras, tai čia tik...
Koks metras?
Nu, jeigu
Daugiau
jūs būtumėt pakėlęs ir palaikęs, mes būtume pamatavę.
Bet tu matei, kiek jin svėrė.
Achujen.
Sakai, kojas biški dreba? Kojaus čia tau taip dreba? Palauk, reikia. Šitą smailą reikia užfiksuoti. Bet, ui.
Pareina. Pareina.
Unlike Raimondas, the first impression of Marius isn't accurate, but he does like to travel and fish. That's probably one of the reasons he's here. And although his fly arsenal is at least 1,000 times smaller than Raimondas, he still managed to be the second to catch a huge fish. Catching a fish, especially a salmon, stirs up huge emotion. And if you would pay attention to a person's eyes and behavior before and after this sacred moment, you'll easily understand that he's experienced ecstasy, a religious experience, or something similar.
Bet nefilmuok rankos nagai apaugę, kur reikia nusikarpyti. Nepasiėmiau žirklių.
Tai tik tai neguldyk aiškiai, nes reikės tos nagus nusigriaužti. Tos purvinus nagus griaužti turėsi. Parodysi biškį. Gali leisti.
Dalykai, dėl kurių verta gyventi.
Bam! Gražus 50-ukas buvo.
Nežinau, kaip...
Raimi, pasveikinsi kolegytę?
Nežinau, net ką pasakyti. Kaifas.
Fishing trip is often unfair. It's not equally generous to everyone, especially salmon fishing. However, being a team player, rejoicing for others, and knowing how to share helps to even out or at least soften this inequality. And so, after 4 days of throwing flies into the spray, 2 of my friends received a blessing. I was left to enjoy their success and lick honey through the glass. 2 days left. The next day we returned to the same spot. There are fish here. And with the current water conditions, there are few convenient fishing spots left. The water is much too high for this time of year. Besides, my friends caught 2 fish in this section yesterday, and I also had a bite, or rather a very, very small tug, which an inexperienced angler might not notice, or at best mistake for a grayling bite. There are quite a few grayling here, and they willingly attack salmon flies, especially small ones like the ones I like to use. However, fate and some experience in fishing make me grab every straw and move the smallest stone in a search. In the spot where I had a suspicious contact yesterday, I noted point that would help me to orient myself. 5 steps from this birch, 2 steps from shore, an approximately 45-degree angle, a shore cast. There's a ripple that is hardly visible. You can't see it when the wind blows, but it's there. Apparently there's a large stone on the bottom, but it's barely visible due to the high water level. My spot is right there. I'll start 5 meters above the ripple, make 10 casts every meter, fishing 5 meters below. There are no signs indicating that there is a fish so far. The game begins. After changing a set of flies with different silhouettes, size and color, I returned to my favorite very small fly. I made only 2 or 3 casts when the line stopped and tightened in the current. It all happened without any strike, slowly and evenly, as if the fly had snagged on a rock. However, I had already passed this spot several times and hadn't snagged any rocks. Many thoughts flashed through my mind in a short second, and I lifted the rod. It's moving. The whole story would lose at least half of its charm if everything went accordingly to the plan. After a few fish runs, the rod broke. Literally, the whole rod broke, and I was left with only the handle and the first eyelet. A long, sharp piece of carbon fiber, like a spear, slid along the line and plunged into the water. The strikes didn't stop, the fish was still on. The moment from yesterday's fishing flashed before my eyes, when, fishing with a very heavy red Francis fly, adorned with a 6mm tungsten head, I hit the blank during a cast. The rod didn't break then, but the sound was horrifying. However, the hit was successful, and there was considerable damage, and now, just when I least needed, the rod on the greater load broke.
Jau.
In the end, everything turned out well. Marius simply brought me another rod, which was set up on the bank. It's good to have two rods. Meanwhile, I cut the line and was left without a rod, just holding the line with the salmon on the other end. Then I tied it to the other rod and pulled the fish out. Rimond, who was nearby, couldn't remain indifferent and pressed the rec button on his phone, thus recording an extraordinary event for posterity. And this trip, this time, distributed the spoils equally among us all. And only now, almost 2 years later, writing down the memories of this adventure, do I realize what a good story it is, and what a fool I am for taking such moments for granted and not managing to pull the camera out of my backpack and hand it to someone.